Hi ladies and gentlemen, my name is Peter, and in this video I'm gonna show you how to set up groups and tracks in Ableton Live. So every time you open a new project, this fully organized template will appear and you won't have to worry about creating new tracks, grouping and routing them over and over again. You'll basically save some time, and besides that, if the new idea pops up in your head, you can quickly open Ableton and start working on it. So I don't really remember, but you should have something like this. If you didn't change your default template of Ableton, you should have something like that, which is just 2 audio tracks and 2 MIDI tracks. So there is one important thing to mention, that control equals command. So if you use PC like I do, you have control button on your keyboard. If you use Mac, you should have a command button on your keyboard. So I'm gonna say control because I use PC, and keep that in mind that control is a command actually. So there are shortcuts that allow you to group tracks. Or if you don't want to use shortcuts, you can actually right click and you'll get the pop-up menu that you can do some stuff. Okay, so let's start from making a drums group. Let's first highlight both of these. So you just hold Shift and you can highlight more things. If you want to highlight more than one thing, you just click at the beginning and at the end while holding Shift, and it will highlight all of these tracks. But if you want to select, for example, this audio track and this MIDI track, you're not holding Shift now, but Control. And you can highlight particular tracks. So for grouping, there's a shortcut. You click Control and G, and it'll create a group. So I'm gonna name it drums. And usually for drums, depending on what you prefer, I usually have an audio track and a MIDI track. MIDI track mostly for hi-hats and audio track for drums. So Control Shift plus T, it'll create a new MIDI track. Control plus T, it'll create a new audio track. So that's the whole group. And there's one useful thing in Ableton 10. If you have one track in the group in a different color than the group is, you can right click on a group and assign track color to grouped tracks and clips. And it will change all the tracks in a different color to the same color as the group is. And the same comes with MIDI clips. If you have MIDI clip or audio clip actually that has been labeled in a different color, you can actually do the same thing on MIDI track or on a group. The same thing, it will change everything inside this group. Okay, so we just created one group called drums. I'm gonna create another group. So Control plus G for another group and Control Shift plus T to create a new MIDI track. So I usually have an audio track and MIDI track for group called music. So this group is usually for instruments, for things like synthesizers, vocal chops, pianos, everything like this kind of stuff. So I usually, if I need another audio track, I just duplicate this, Control plus D, and I can just place some audio tracks on the next track. So we have a music group, and the same for this. So Control plus G and Control plus R is for renaming. So I'm gonna call it basses group. And again, I'm gonna create now an audio track, which is Control plus T. And now the last thing, I'm gonna set another group. It's gonna be the last group, Control plus R for renaming, and it's gonna be FXs, which I'll put here things like some ambient stuff, white noises, risers, impacts. So that's the main setup actually. If you hold Alt and click left mouse on this circle here, it will fold all the groups. But there's one thing we need. All the tracks except maybe classical music should be sidechained. Right, so let's create a sidechain track. So I'm gonna create a new audio track and I'm gonna name it Sidechain. Let's think what group should go to sidechain. Music group, yeah. So if you open the group here, and if you can see the master here. So what that means is that the output of the track is going to the master directly. And if you click that, you can actually change the output of this track. So that's the thing we are gonna do. I'm gonna send it to sidechain, and now it's not going to master, but it's going to sidechain, and the sidechain group is going to the master then, as you can see here. But in order to be able to hear anything on the sidechain group, we have to click in here. And as you can see, as I talk right now, you can even see the line here. So there's a bassist group as well. We're gonna route this to sidechain track. So every time the kick and snare hits, the music group and bassist group will be sidechained. But we need the last thing, another thing. That's gonna be the trigger, because if you prefer sidechaining to the kick and snare, you can totally do this, but I prefer using a trigger and place this trigger whenever I want. And actually, if you use a trigger, you can adjust the shape of a sidechain more easily. So I'm gonna insert a new MIDI track. I'm gonna set the same color as a sidechain, and I'm gonna rename it to trigger. And now, before we send this anywhere, because it's not actually, there's just no output, it's not going anywhere, I'm gonna, on my sidechain group, add a compressor. So I prefer using LFO tool because you can easily adjust the shape of the sidechain, which would look like this usually, like so. If you don't have LFO tool, you can still use a compressor. I'm gonna look for some white noise. Okay, so this white noise has a very flat shape, so I'm gonna simply drag it to the trigger group and paste it over there. So, I mean to the trigger track. It is a MIDI clip, it's a MIDI track, so if you put something here, it will automatically put this into the sampler. So now, let's turn off snap, and this is our sidechain trigger. So I'm gonna mute this track as we don't want the white noise to be audible, because if I play it, it's actually like we can hear the white noise, which we don't need. We need only the signal here. So on the compressor on a sidechain track, I'm gonna turn on sidechain mode, and as you can see, there's an audio from. So I'm gonna pick trigger and I'm gonna leave this on post effects. So let's actually create some MIDI clips right now. So Control Shift and M, it will create a new MIDI clip, and I'm gonna just simply. So as you can see on the sidechain, I'm gonna tweak some. So we have some piano. Okay, so now I'm gonna just decrease the threshold. Like this. You can actually decrease it all the way down. And as you can see, there's a spike when the trigger hits. So you can actually put this, for example, here, and it'll, every time the trigger hits, it'll trigger this sidechain. So I'll talk about sidechaining in another video, but you can adjust the length of the white noise, so it'll create a different shape for a sidechain. A little bit longer. So the longer is white noise, the more pumping you'll get. So the settings here are pretty nice. You can tweak the ratio. You can put it, if you want, like very hard pumping effect. But it works on this. As you can see now, if the ratio is on 2:1, it's actually not decreasing the volume all the way down. So the attack, in this case, it works on like 16 or 20. Especially, I changed this to 0.01 millisecond to show you that there's a little click. So if you get this little click from sidechaining, you actually have to increase the attack. And release is the time that it goes to the previous stage. So very long, it will actually create like a very compressed pumping effect. So on the default 50 milliseconds it sounds all right. So that would be all. That's your default template. The last thing we have to do is just save this template like this. This is gonna be our default template. Okay, so in order to save this, you have to go to Options and Preferences. And now in File folder, you can see Save Current Set as Default. You simply click Save and it'll ask you, maybe not, if you want to override the default set. I'm not gonna change it. Obviously, I do have my current template which works perfectly. So that will be all for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. Bye.